Hey there guys, got a video here for you today on the FX DRS, and in this one we're going to be rebarreling the rifle. So I have a little bit of machining and a little bit of testing to show you, and I do want to mention that I have edited this video in a slightly different way, so you'll have to let me know whether you prefer this way or my old way. With that said, in our previous video we took the rifle apart and found out that the valve cap was loose. At the time, I mentioned that this may be causing some issues with the accuracy of the rifle, and that did turn out to be the case. The rifle was much more accurate with the valve cap done up nice and tight, as you can see on screen now. This testing was done at 50 yards and I'm doing 5-shot groups. Although I will say that I did not use the magazine for these groups. They were done by loading the pellets directly into the barrel just to rule out any possible magazine issues. I was much happier with these results, but I still think it could be improved slightly, so a replacement barrel has to be fitted. The barrel that we're going to be using for this conversion is from an Air Arms HFT 500. The Air Arms HFT 500 is a 177 target rifle, and the barrels are made by Lothar Wolfer. I've used quite a few of these now in other FX builds, and I've always found them to be really quite accurate. As this is a chambered barrel, both ends have been finished, so we have a nice crown at this end, and at the other end the lead has been cut, the transfer port has been drilled, the pellet probe O-ring groove is in place, and as an added bonus, the OD is 14mm, and that's obviously been blued, as you can see there. We are going to have to use the original features of the barrel, as if we were to cut the end off and start again, the barrel would be slightly too short for the air cylinder, so the end of the barrel would be free floating and not captured by the end of the air cylinder. But here's one I machined up earlier, so what we're going to have to do is machine the end, sleeve the end with a piece of brass just to extend the back of the barrel about 4mm, then turn the shank down to suit the DRS block. And then as you can see here, if we line it up with the original liner, you can see that the barrel is slightly shorter than the original one, but it still is sealed at the end here, so the barrel works in the air cylinder. But with that all said and done, let's take you over to the lathe and start work. Right then, so first things first, we're going to be making the transfer port sleeve. I've got a piece of brass chucked up in the 3-jaw. We're just going to be turning the OD, then boring the ID to around 8.5mm so that we can push it on the end of the barrel. So let's begin. That's the hole drilled and then bored out with an end mill. The next thing we're going to do is come through with a mini boring bar and just get it to final size. Right then, to measure the internal diameter, we're going to be using a ball gauge. So to use these, all you do, put them in the bore, expand the end by just turning the little nut at the back here until we get a light amount of resistance on the gauge itself within the bore. So there it is there. Then we can just measure across the ball itself. So 8.51, 8.5, pretty much spot on the money. Last thing to do in this setup is to chamfer the internal and external corners, then part the piece off about 28mm long. With that done, the next thing we can do is start work on the barrel work. So what I've gone ahead and done is got the barrel chucked up in the 3-jaw with an indicator on this end, just to make sure that we're running nice and true. So as you can see there is a little bit of movement in the indicator arm, but that's not enough to worry about. So for now I am happy. The first thing we're going to have to do is touch off on this face here and remove as much of this little chamfer here as possible. When our brass sleeve goes up against this, we don't want a little turned down section or a step in the barrel as the pellet goes through it. Once we've turned that off, we can zero our DRO, then start work on the OD, and we're going to be turning this down to 8.5mm, about 20mm long. Right then, so we've got the ends turned down and our brass sleeve is a nice fit over there. I didn't want a press fit on this part here, as I was a little worried that as the wall is so thin that I might crush the barrel inside, so I opted for a nice fit. There's hardly any play there, but there is enough so that we can get some glue around this component and secure it in place. Before we get that secured in place though, there are just a few things I need to do. First one is clean out the hole, make sure that's nice and free, and I also need to mark the position of this hole on the barrel, as when we install the sleeve there, the transfer port is covered over, so we need some way of locating that and getting it drilled in position. So what I'm going to do is do all those things, then get this glued on. Right then, so as it sits now, the glue has had about 20 minutes or so to go off nice and hard, and now the brass sleeve is glued to the barrel nice and firmly, and it shouldn't move when we're machining it, but we will go nice and slow as to not break the glue. What we need to do is face the end to length, then turn the shank diameter. As we said before, the barrel needs to be about 4mm longer than the original one to match the one on the FX DRS. So what I've gone ahead and done is just transferred my barrel zero about 4¼ mm out, so now when we face the material off, it will be the correct length. Right then, so we'll face the end off, turn the shank to 10.5mm, then I'll bring you back when we start work on the pellet infeed. With that done, the next thing we need to do is get the end drilled out so a pellet can be fed into the end of the barrel. To do this, we're going to be using a 4mm end mill to open out the hole first, then coming through with a 4.8mm drill bit and opening out the hole to its finished dimension. We obviously pre-drilled the hole earlier and we're using an end mill because the end mill will cut a new hole concentric to the OD rather than following the hole that's already there. A twist drill only cuts on the ends, not the sides, so it will follow whatever hole is already in the piece of work, whereas an end mill is both end cutting and side cutting, so it cuts a nice straight hole. With that done, there's pretty much all the lathe work complete. What I'm going to do is give everything a quick clean out, then we'll take it over to the mill and we'll get the transfer port hole drilled along with the dimples in the side. Right then, and here's our setup for the mill. We have the barrel installed into a 4-sided collet block, then we have a vice stop at the back here. What I've gone ahead and done is just use an edge finder to find the centre of the barrel in the Y direction and also 10mm from the edge of the barrel in the X direction. I'm not quite sure if the camera will pick it up, but just on the top of the barrel here is our centre mark, which I marked earlier, and that indicates the exact top position of the transfer port. To be honest with you, it doesn't really matter if I don't hit it exactly where the old transfer port was, but I would like to get it fairly close. So if we take a look at the original barrel, we have the transfer port here, which is about 3.5mm, and then we have these two dimples, one on either side. We don't have to mill the flats in this barrel, as this piece on our barrel isn't a separate part, and all these flats allow you to do is screw it into this steel section of the barrel. So what we're going to do is drill the transfer port hole, then index the barrel and get the dimples put on either side. With the barrel complete, next thing to do was to fit it into the rifle and start testing. So here's my setup on the bench. As you can see, I've got the gun set up on my Accutac, a rear bag at the back, and then here's just a quick look at the pellets that I typically use. This is my first round of pellets to test, and it includes 90% of the current lineup from both JSB and H&N. If none of these pellets work, I pull out the second round of pellets, which include some of my second choice brands like QYS and Norma. I much prefer to have the rifle shoot JSB or H&N pellets, as for me they seem much more consistent batch to batch. Once the preferred pellet has been found, it's time for some 50-yard groups, and as always I am shooting on Pete's Airgun Farm in the 50-yard range with a target set out on the back wall. I am doing 5-shot groups and the target is an A4 sheet of paper with a number of 25mm circles printed onto it. All these groups here were done using a mag, and overall I'm quite happy with how the new barrel is performing. Every now and again we still do get 1 or 2 flyers, but I'm putting these down to more of a magazine issue rather than a rifle issue. The magazine spring tension is set awfully high, but unfortunately there is no way to reduce the spring tension with how the magazine's currently set up. I perhaps should have done some single shot loaded groups on camera, but I always like to shoot with the magazine as it gives a better representation of what the rifle will do on average. I could spend all day downrange and only ever show you the very best groups that the rifle does, but ultimately I think most of you understand that even a fantastic rifle will get a few flyers every now and again. That's just something to accept when you're shooting, and showing both the good and the bad gives a much more accurate real-life representation of how the rifle shoots. Next up are just a couple groups done at 30 yards. We're still using the same targets and we're still doing 5-shot groups, but as you can see there, at 30 yards the pellets pretty much go through the same hole. To be honest with you, I don't really do much shooting at 30 yards as I have a 50-yard range available to me, but I know a lot of people shoot in their back garden and some people like to see the closer range testing. But there we have it, so I'll take you back over to the bench, then we'll take a quick close-up look at the groups. Right then, so I'll get you a quick look at the groups, then I'll let you go. These ones over here were done using the solid barrel at both 50 and 30 yards. These ones over here were done using the original liner with the valve cap done up nice and tight. As you can see, the groups have definitely improved from when we shot the rifle in the overview, and the average edge-to-edge measurement of these 4 groups here is 18.5 millimeters, so that's 14 millimeters center to center, and most of the groups will fit under a 5p piece, so that one does. This one's awfully close, maybe not just quite. This one, again, not just because of that one at the top there. Then this one does, but we do have a flyer up there. If the rifle came out the box shooting like that, I would have been more than happy. I think that's perfectly acceptable for a 750-pound rifle, straight out the box. But we decided to put a new barrel on it, and this is what it can do. So the groups that you saw me shoot on camera was this bottom row here. And then I did another row of groups at 50 yards, without the scope cam attached, so as you can see, pretty similar in the size and shape of the groups. Then we flipped the target over, and these 2 rows here were done at 30 yards. The 2 groups that you saw me do on camera were down the bottom here. Measuring the groups done at 50 yards, the edge-to-edge measurement measures 15.5, with the average center-to-center distance measuring around 11 millimeters. So I'm more than happy with that. I think that's an absolutely fantastic result for this rifle. Every now and again you do get a really nice little group. So this one here measures about 12.5 millimeters. And again, this one that we did on camera, 5 shots at 50 yards, measuring about 13 millimeters edge to edge, or about 8.5 millimeters center to center. Then at 30 yards the pellets do pretty much go through the same hole. This was my zeroing group, and then once it was zeroed, pretty much all the pellets touching at 30 yards. That group there I was really quite happy with. I did that group without the scope cam attached. Then someone down the range decided to put a 2.2 pellet through it, which ruined the group unfortunately. That's a shame, but what can you do? Measuring these groups, probably this one in the corner here is probably the best, and that looks to be a 9mm group edge to edge, or 4.5mm center to center. With that all said and done, that's pretty much going to do it for this particular video. So thanks for watching, we'll see you in the next one.